In the shining halls of the Varethian Empire, beauty and strength were everything, and weakness was a sin, especially for those born into the royal bloodline. The empire stretched across 7 star systems, ruled by the High Council and watched over by millions of proud soldiers. Among them lived Princess Alira, the youngest daughter of Emperor Kael, known across the stars not for her grace or power, but for her flaw. She could not bear a child. From the day her secret was discovered, her name became a whisper of shame in the royal corridors. Servants bowed when she passed, but their eyes were full of pity. Courtiers smiled to her face but mocked her behind closed doors. The Empress, her own mother, once said coldly, "A queen who cannot give life is already dead." Those words cut deeper than any blade. When political tensions rose between the Varethians and the humans of Earth, the council gathered to discuss peace offerings. Some suggested technology, others gold or ships. But one noble, known for his cruelty, laughed and said, "Why not send the infertile princess? Humans breed like animals. Perhaps she can find a purpose there." The hall erupted with laughter, cruel and sharp. Alira stood silently among them, her face pale but her eyes steady. Her father, tired of endless wars and scandals, gave a single nod. "Let it be done," he said. "If she can serve peace, let her go." And just like that, her fate was sealed. The next morning, her attendants prepared her for the journey. They draped her in silver silk and placed a golden crest upon her forehead, a symbol of royal exile disguised as diplomacy. As they dressed her, one whispered, "You are brave, princess." But Alira could hear the fear in her tone. Even her guards struggled not to smirk. She boarded the imperial vessel Solar Veil under the watch of sneering officers. One of them, a tall commander, muttered, "A princess without heirs sent to a planet full of brutes." What a fitting joke. Alira said nothing. She simply looked out at the stars beyond the viewport. They burned cold and distant like the eyes of her people. The journey to Earth took 8 light cycles. Each day she trained in silence, memorizing human customs, languages, and military records. Her attendants thought she was wasting her time, but she was preparing herself. If this was exile, she would face it with pride, not tears. She would not give her enemies the joy of seeing her break. When the solar veil entered Earth's orbit, the humans greeted her with warmth she did not expect. The reception was small, just a few soldiers and a tall man in a black uniform with calm blue eyes. His name was Captain Ethan Cole, commander of the Earth Alliance ship Odyssey. Unlike the alien nobles she had known, his bow was not mocking, it was respectful. "Sincere. Welcome to Earth, Princess Alira," he said, voice steady. "Your journey must have been long." She blinked, taken aback. No one had spoken to her like that in years, as if she were still someone of worth, not a broken thing to be traded away. The translator device hummed softly as it carried his words into her mind, but she understood even without it. Respect did not need translation. When she stepped onto the human ship, the guards from her world whispered among themselves. "They really treat her like royalty," one laughed quietly. "If only they knew." Another added, "Maybe the humans will finally find a use for her." Alira ignored them, but inside, her chest ached. For all her strength, for all her training, she was still a woman who wanted to be more than a joke, more than a symbol of failure. As the Odyssey departed orbit, Ethan walked beside her, explaining each deck, the control room, the observation deck, the living quarters. His crew saluted respectfully as she passed, curious but not cruel. Alira found herself relaxing, though she did not understand why. At dinner, Ethan noticed she barely touched her food. "Do humans not prepare meals to your taste?" he asked lightly. She shook her head. "No," she said softly. "I am not used to kindness." That answer stayed with him long after the meal ended. Late that night, Alira stood by the viewing glass, watching Earth spin below like a jewel in the darkness. Her reflection stared back, lonely, proud, and uncertain. She had been sent here as punishment, a jest in the eyes of her people. Yet for the first time in her life, she felt something strange stirring inside her chest. Not fear, not pain, but a quiet spark of possibility. Perhaps this exile was not the end. Perhaps it was the beginning of something no one, not even the cruel council, could have predicted. The Barren princess of the Varethian Empire had been sent to a human world as a joke. But the stars themselves seemed to whisper otherwise, because destiny, like love, has a way of laughing last. The next morning, Elira woke to the soft hum of engines and the faint warmth of sunlight filtered through the Odyssey's glass panels. Human ships were smaller and less grand than the ones from her empire, but there was something about this vessel. It felt alive, full of purpose, not pride. When she stepped out of her quarters, she saw humans laughing, sharing food, fixing cables, all moving with simple harmony. No one bowed. No one whispered behind her back. They just smiled politely and carried on. It was strange, unsettling, and oddly peaceful. Captain Ethan Cole noticed her standing quietly near the command deck. "You're up early," he said, offering a friendly nod. "Care for some breakfast?" She hesitated, unsure how to respond. In her world, captains did not invite royalty to eat. They obeyed or commanded. But this man was different. His voice held no arrogance, no fear, just calm respect. In the dining hall, she sat at a long metal table among human officers. They didn't stare or gossip. One of them, a woman with red hair, handed her a small cup. "Coffee," she said, "bitter, but it wakes you up." Elira sipped it and almost coughed. The crew laughed kindly, not cruelly. For a moment, she forgot the titles and shame of her old life. She was just another traveler among them. Later, Ethan showed her around the ship. He pointed out the navigation room, the communication hub, and the small greenhouse where humans grew food in zero gravity. "We don't waste anything here," he said. "Every hand matters." Elira found herself fascinated. In her empire, the strong ruled and the weak served. But here, even the smallest worker was treated with dignity. As days passed, Elira began to see what made humans unique. They were fragile. She could crush most of them with one hand. Yet their courage burned brighter than any weapon. They laughed in danger, worked together under stress, and comforted each other in silence. It was something her empire, with all its power, had lost long ago. One evening, the Odyssey received a distress signal from a nearby mining station. Pirates, rogue machines, and mercenaries were attacking. The crew moved fast, preparing defenses. Elira watched as Ethan gave orders with calm precision. "Shields to 70%, he said. "All medical teams stand by." No shouting, no panic, only unity. When the pirates' ships appeared on radar, the Odyssey shuddered under fire. Explosions rattled the walls. Elira wanted to help, but she had no command here. She could only watch as humans fought against impossible odds. Then, an explosion tore through a nearby corridor. Ethan sprinted toward it. Elira followed instinctively. Smoke filled the air, and two human engineers lay trapped under fallen debris. Without hesitation, Ethan grabbed a sparking cable and yanked it aside, electricity tearing across his glove. "Get them out!" he shouted. Elira, ignoring her shock, used her strength to lift the heavy beam with one arm. The humans crawled free, coughing, alive. When the battle ended, the Odyssey floated quietly among drifting wreckage. The humans had won, but Ethan was bleeding from a burn on his arm. He laughed softly when he saw Elira's worried expression. "We'll be fine," he said, "just another day in space." She stared at him, confused. "You risked your life for them," she said, "for simple workers." Ethan smiled faintly. "They're not workers. They're my crew. Every one of them matters." Those words struck something deep inside her. In her empire, life was measured by bloodline, by perfection. Here it was measured by heart. She began to realize that humans didn't need power to be strong. They had something else, something greater. That night, Elira stood again by the viewing glass, watching the stars pass like silver fire. Ethan approached quietly, holding 2 cups of coffee. "Still not used to the taste?" he asked, handing her one. She shook her head, smiling faintly. "No, but I think I'm starting to understand it." "Understand what?" "The way humans turn bitterness into strength," she said softly, taking a sip. Ethan chuckled. "We've had a lot of practice." In the silence that followed, Elira's reflection shimmered beside his. Two souls from opposite worlds, bound by something neither of them yet understood. For the first time, she felt the walls of her heart tremble, not with pain, but with warmth. Maybe kindness wasn't weakness. Maybe it was the strongest force in the galaxy. And deep inside, the Barren princess began to feel something new. Something growing quietly where hope had once died. Days turned into weeks aboard the Odyssey, and the alien princess began to move through the ship like a quiet shadow. At first, the crew kept their distance. She was beautiful, yes, but strange. Her pale skin shimmered faintly under light, and her silver eyes seemed to see through walls. But over time, Even the wary engineers and medical staff grew used to her calm presence. Alira never demanded anything, never complained, never used her title. She just watched, learned, and slowly, silently became part of their world. Ethan Cole noticed it first. Every morning she appeared in the science lab before sunrise, studying human biology, language, and history. She moved with purpose, her hands steady, her eyes thoughtful. When he entered the lab one day, she was staring at a holographic chart of human DNA. "You have such fragile bodies," she said softly, "and yet you survive everything." Ethan smiled. "We break easy," he replied, "but we also heal easy. It's kind of our thing." That small conversation marked the beginning of something unspoken. From then on, they often found themselves working side by side. She would ask about the human heart, about emotion, about courage. He would ask about her people, their stars, their laws. At first, she answered carefully, hiding her pain behind royal manners. But slowly, Ethan's patience and quiet humor disarmed her. He never treated her like a princess or a guest, just another life form trying to understand the universe. One night, while the Odyssey drifted near the rings of a frozen planet, Alira joined Ethan on the observation deck. The view was breathtaking, a field of crystal ice stretching forever. "Your world is full of wonders," she whispered. "Even the silence feels alive." Ethan glanced at her. "It's not just silence," he said. "It's peace. You don't need to fill it with noise." Alira looked at him for a long moment. In her empire, silence was punishment. Here it was serenity. She realized how different humans were. Not weak, not foolish, just human. Capable of finding warmth in cold, beauty in pain, and love in loss. The next day, a small accident happened in the engine bay. A coolant line burst, spraying freezing vapor across the floor. Ethan rushed in first, trying to seal the leak. Alira followed without hesitation, her instincts overriding her training. The air grew thick with frost as she helped him lift a damaged panel. When it finally closed, Ethan collapsed against the wall, coughing. His hands were bleeding from cold burns. Without thinking, Alira knelt beside him and pressed her glowing fingers over the wounds. Blue light spread across his skin and the bleeding stopped. "You shouldn't risk yourself for others," she whispered, her voice trembling. "You could have died." Ethan looked at her, half smiling despite the pain. "If someone's got to get hurt," he said softly, "I'd rather it be me than them." That night, Alira could not sleep. She kept replaying his words, his face, the warmth in his eyes when he looked at her. Not with pity, not with disgust, but with something dangerously close to care. She had never seen such strength in kindness. It confused her, scared her, yet drew her closer in the following days. She started bringing him food during long shifts, leaving data files neatly organized for him, and sometimes sitting quietly beside him while he worked. He noticed but never said a word. Their bond grew not through speeches or grand gestures, but through silence, comfortable shared silence. One evening, during a ship-wide maintenance blackout, the corridors were lit only by emergency lights. Alira found herself walking toward the command deck, guided by instinct. Ethan was there, working under dim red glow, his face tired but calm. She hesitated before asking, "Why do you care so much for your crew?" He didn't look up. "Because no one wins alone," he said. "You either stand together, or you fall together." She thought of her empire, of how her people laughed at weakness, how they left her behind for not being perfect. For the first time, she understood the difference between a ruler and a leader. A ruler demanded loyalty through fear. A leader earned it through love. When the lights flickered back to life, Ethan finally looked at her and smiled faintly. "You should get some rest, princess." She met his gaze and said softly, "Alira. Just Alira." Ethan nodded once, his eyes warm. "Then good night, Alira." As she walked away, her heart felt heavy and light all at once. Something inside her had begun to change, quietly, invisibly, like a seed pushing through cold soil. The barren princess of the stars had begun to feel life growing where none was meant to exist. Not in her body yet, but in her heart. And it all started with one human's simple kindness. The days that followed were filled with quiet curiosity and whispers of something new. Not just in the ship's corridors, but in Alira's heart. She began spending longer hours in the science bay, studying human DNA samples under shimmering blue light. What fascinated her wasn't the structure itself, it was the energy behind it, the resilience. Human genes carried strange flexibility, something no other known species possessed. Where her kind had perfected purity and control, humans had mastered adaptation and survival. Their cells didn't just resist change, they embraced it. Ethan noticed her growing obsession. "You're here earlier every day," he said one morning, leaning against the doorframe, coffee in hand. "Should I be worried you're building something dangerous?" Alira smiled faintly, her eyes fixed on the data streams. "Dangerous? No. Unpredictable, perhaps." "Those are usually the same thing," he replied lightly, but there was warmth behind his words, not suspicion. In truth, Alira had started something she could never tell the Council, or even her own people. She was testing the fusion of human and Varethian biology. It wasn't for war or conquest, but for understanding. If humanity's adaptability could be merged with her species' perfection, perhaps no one would ever be born broken again. Perhaps she could fix what her own body lacked. Each night she ran secret simulations, cell fusion, neural mapping, and micro-adaptive regeneration. Most failed. Some produced strange readings. But one night, under the soft hum of the ship's lights, she noticed something different, a pattern. Her own genetic sample, when mixed with a trace of Ethan's, didn't reject or collapse, it stabilized. Two codes that should have been incompatible found balance. Her hands trembled as she watched the screen pulse with faint green light. "Impossible," she whispered. For her people, infertility was a curse written in their DNA. But now, staring at the impossible fusion on her monitor, she saw something she hadn't felt in years: hope. When Ethan walked in unexpectedly, she nearly shut down the system in panic. But his calm tone stopped her. "You're hiding something," he said, "but I trust you have your reasons." Alira hesitated, her eyes filled with conflict. "If I told you, you'd think I'm trying to play God." He smiled slightly. "We humans do that every time we light a fire." That night she decided to continue, but she wasn't ready to tell him everything. Still, Ethan's quiet trust gave her courage. He would stop her if it became dangerous, of that she was certain. Weeks passed, and the Odyssey traveled through the border systems. Alira worked tirelessly, testing microsamples, analyzing patterns, feeling something strange within her. At first she blamed the exhaustion, the long hours, but her body began to change. Her skin glowed faintly under certain lights. Her heartbeat sometimes echoed in her ears like two rhythms instead of one. Then came the explosion. It happened in the middle of a test. The containment shield overloaded as she tried to amplify a human energy field through her own blood sample. Alarms screamed. Fire streaked across the lab. Alira was thrown against the wall, pain ripping through her chest. Before she could move, the door burst open and Ethan was there, pulling her out through the smoke, coughing and half blind. He carried her to the med bay, shouting for the doctor. "She's not breathing," he yelled, his voice breaking, but then her chest began to glow. Softly at first, then brighter, like starlight trapped beneath her skin. The monitors flickered wildly. The doctor stared, speechless. When Alira opened her eyes again, they were no longer silver. They shimmered with human blue at the edges. Ethan stayed beside her through the night. When she finally woke, she whispered weakly, "I changed something in me." "What did you do?" he asked quietly. "I tried to fix what was broken." She touched her chest, trembling.
"And now, I think something new lives inside me." The medical scanner confirmed the impossible. Within her, faint life signs pulsed.
"Not infection, not mutation. Life." Ethan froze. "That can't be." "It is," she whispered, tears glimmering. "It shouldn't be, but it is. The Barren one carries life." He reached for her hand gently. "Then we'll face whatever comes together." Alira closed her eyes, her heart racing with both terror and wonder. For the first time, she understood what her people had never grasped. Life wasn't created through perfection, but through connection, through the joining of strength and vulnerability. The experiment she called forbidden had done more than science ever could. It had rewritten fate itself, and somewhere beyond the stars, destiny began to stir, whispering that the universe had just changed forever. The news spread faster than light, crossing the galaxy through encrypted channels and royal informants. The Barren princess of the Varethian Empire was carrying a child, one not of pure royal blood, but half human, half alien to the Council. It was an insult beyond measure. To the people it was an omen, and to Alira it was a miracle. On board the Odyssey, the air grew tense. The once quiet corridors buzzed with messages intercepted from the Varethian fleets. They were coming. Not to negotiate, not to talk, to retrieve their princess and destroy whatever they saw as corruption. Ethan stood in the command deck, his hands tight on the rail. "They won't stop," he said. His voice low. Elira stood beside him wrapped in a white cloak, her face calm but her eyes heavy with fear. "They will not forgive me, Ethan. My existence is already a crime. But this child," she pressed her hand gently over her stomach, "they will see him as a monster." Ethan looked at her firmly. "Then they'll have to go through me first." Outside, the stars shimmered cold and distant as 3 Varethian warships appeared from hyperspace. Their dark hulls were covered with gold sigils, the marks of royal decree. The lead ship sent a transmission, and a deep voice filled the deck. "By order of the High Council, surrender Princess Elira immediately. Humanity has violated sacred genetic law. The sentence is death." Ethan's jaw tightened. "Not happening." He turned to his pilot. "Helm, prepare evasive pattern Delta 9, keep them off our tail." The Odyssey lurched forward, engines flaring blue as it darted between asteroid fields. Laser fire streaked past the hull, shaking the ship like a living thing under siege. The humans fought bravely. Even as systems flickered and alarms screamed, Elira stood in the medbay, gripping the edge of a console. Every blast echoed through her body, but what she felt inside was stranger. Her child's heartbeat strong and steady. It pulsed with a rhythm that wasn't Varethian, wasn't human. It was something new, something alive. For the first time in her life, she wasn't the broken one. She was the beginning. When the shields dropped to 40%, Ethan stormed into the engineering bay. "Reroute auxiliary power to propulsion," he ordered. "We can't outgun them, so we outfly them." One of his officers, bleeding from a cut on her forehead, shouted, "Sir, if we push the engines that hard, they'll burn out." "Then we'll glide the rest of the way," he said and slammed his palm on the console. "Do it." The Odyssey burst through a cluster of frozen asteroids, ice and fire spinning around it like shrapnel. The pursuing warships hesitated, their tracking systems confused by the debris. Ethan used the moment to dive the ship toward the gravity well of a nearby planet. "We'll hide here," he muttered, in the storm's shadow. Inside the dim cockpit, Elira appeared, breathless. "You shouldn't fight them for me," she said softly. Ethan looked up from the controls. "I'm not fighting for you," he said, voice rough. "I'm fighting with you. There's a difference." The storm outside raged across the planet's surface, violet lightning striking through dark clouds of gas. Ethan guided the ship into the atmosphere, the hull creaking as fire danced across the windows. The humans braced for impact as the ship dove into the chaos. For a few terrifying seconds, the Odyssey vanished from every radar in the galaxy. When silence finally returned, they were hidden, floating quietly inside the storm's eye, surrounded by electric clouds and endless thunder. Ethan exhaled slowly. "We're safe. For now." Elira turned toward him, her expression soft. "You risked your crew, your life for me. Why?" He looked at her and simply said, "Because some things are worth protecting. Even if the whole galaxy says otherwise." In that moment, she felt it, deeper than gratitude, stronger than duty. It wasn't just connection anymore. It was love, fierce and unstoppable. The next day, while the crew repaired damaged systems, Elira stood at the viewport gazing at the glowing storm. She whispered to the child inside her, "They wanted me gone. They wanted me forgotten, but you are proof that even the stars can defy fate." Far above, the Varethian ships began searching the system, unaware that the woman they had mocked as Barren was now carrying the key to the future. A child born not of one world, but of two, a living answer to the cruelty of empires. And as thunder rolled across the alien skies, the Odyssey drifted in silence, hiding the miracle that would one day shake the universe itself. The storm finally broke after 3 long days of silence. When the Odyssey rose out of the violet clouds, its hull scorched but intact, Elira stood on the bridge, her reflection flickering across the cracked glass behind her. The stars of her home system shimmered faintly, Varethian territory, the place she had once called home, now the heart of everything that wanted her dead. Ethan watched her quietly from the command chair, his face lit by the soft blue glow of the controls. "You're sure you want to go back?" he asked. "We can stay hidden. No one would find us here." Elira turned slowly, her hands resting on the curved edge of the console. "If I keep running, they will never stop hunting you," she said softly, "and I refuse to let this child live in fear. It's time I faced them." He nodded, though his jaw tightened. "Then we go together." The ship approached the Varethian capital world, Seraphis Prime, a glittering planet covered in golden towers and floating citadels. The last time Elira had seen it, she was being sent away, mocked and humiliated. Now she returned with life in her womb and purpose in her heart. But the Empire didn't welcome her. The moment the Odyssey entered orbit, dozens of defense drones surrounded them, red lights flashing. "Identify yourself," a mechanical voice demanded. "State your purpose." Ethan looked at Elira. "You're the princess," he said. "You answer." She straightened her back, her voice calm and royal. "I am Princess Elira of House Kyle. I request audience with the Council of Elders." There was a pause, then the drones fell back. The message came through cold and sharp. "Permission granted." "You will come alone." Ethan frowned. "Alone? No chance." But Elira shook her head gently. "If you come with me, they'll see it as defiance. I need them to listen before they attack." He started to argue, but her hand touched his. "You've fought enough for me," she said quietly. "Let me fight for us." When she stepped onto the marble landing platform of the Imperial Citadel, every guard in the hall froze. Her silver cloak swayed with the wind, her glowing eyes a mix of human blue and Varethian silver, and when she reached the council chamber, whispers spread like fire. "She lives? She carries a child?" It cannot be true. The High Council sat in a circle of light, their faces hard and proud. At the center stood her father, Emperor Kale. He looked older, colder, the weight of the crown pressing down like a mountain. When his gaze fell upon her, silence filled the air. Finally he said, "Why have you returned, daughter?" Elira stepped forward slowly, every movement steady. "Because you sent me away in shame," she said. "You called me Barren, a failure, a curse upon our bloodline, but you were wrong." Gasps echoed through the chamber as she removed her cloak, revealing the soft glow beneath her skin, the pulse of life within her. Her voice didn't tremble. "This child is alive. My child, half human, half Varethian. Proof that what you called broken was only waiting to be healed." One elder slammed his staff against the floor. "Abomination! You dare taint our blood with human impurity." Elira's eyes flashed. "You call it impurity, I call it balance," she said sharply. "You speak of purity while your hearts rot with arrogance. You claim perfection but cannot even create life without cruelty." Her words rippled through the chamber like a storm. Even her father could not speak, his lips pressed in shock and disbelief. Then from the corner an old priest rose and stepped forward. His voice trembled. "Bring the child to us when it is born," he said softly. "Let the stars judge whether it is curse or miracle." Ethan entered the hall then, against all orders. His uniform torn, eyes defiant. "You won't touch her," he said coldly, standing beside Elira. "Not her. Not the baby." Guards raised their weapons, but Elira lifted her hand. "Stop," she said, her voice echoing with strange power. The guards froze, their weapons lowering as if pulled by invisible weight. Blue and silver light radiated from her palms, energy born of both worlds, both bloodlines. The Emperor's eyes widened. "What are you?" Elira looked at him, tears glistening. Something new, something neither of us could have created alone. Outside the citadel, the sky shimmered with twin lights, one gold, one blue, merging together above the capital. For the first time in Varethian history, the heavens themselves bowed to change. And as Ethan took her hand, Elira whispered, "They sent me away in shame, but I return with life." The Emperor said nothing. But every soldier who once laughed now knelt, heads lowered. For they saw what the council refused to see, that the future had already arrived and she carried it within her. The day the child was born, the stars above Seraphis Prime shimmered brighter than ever before. The golden sky cracked with light, and even the endless ships drifting in orbit seemed to pause, as if the galaxy itself was holding its breath. Inside the med chamber of the Odyssey, the air was heavy with tension and awe. Elira's hand gripped Ethan's tightly, her breathing ragged but steady, her silver blue eyes glowing faintly beneath the dim lights. The ship's doctor whispered, "Heart rate stable." "It's happening." Then a cry, soft, strong, new, filled the air. Cutting through centuries of silence and cruelty, Elira's tears flowed freely as she held her newborn child for the first time. His skin shimmered faintly like starlight. Neither fully human nor fully Varethian, Ethan stared in stunned silence. The child blinked, his eyes flickering between his mother's silver and his father's blue. A miracle, breathing, crying, alive. His name, Elira whispered weakly, will be Elion. Ethan smiled, his voice low and rough. Bridge of Stars? She nodded, pressing her forehead gently against the baby's. Because he connects what the universe tried to keep apart. But peace did not come easily. Outside the ship, fleets gathered once again, Varithian vessels and human cruisers both, facing each other in orbit. Each side demanded custody of the child, claiming he represented power. Danger or salvation, depending on who you asked. The universe had never seen such a birth, and now it didn't know how to handle it. Inside the Odyssey, Ethan stood before the main viewport, watching the two armies face each other. They'll fight for him, he said quietly. Not because they care, but because they fear what they don't understand. Elira, weak but determined, rose from her bed, the infant in her arms. Then we will make them understand, she said firmly. Not through weapons, but through truth. Moments later, Ethan opened a wideband transmission. Every ship, every planet within range received the broadcast. On the screen, Elira appeared, her royal crest gleaming faintly. Her child resting in her arms, she spoke softly. Yet her voice carried through the stars, steady as a heartbeat. I was sent away because I could not give life, she said. They mocked me, called me Barren. But a human showed me kindness, not pity. He gave me hope, not orders. Together we created what both our species believed impossible. She looked down at Elion, then back at the camera. This child is not a weapon, not a mistake. He is proof that strength does not come from bloodlines or power, but from compassion, from unity, from love. Across the galaxy, millions watched in silence. Some cried, some cursed, but none could look away, for in that moment, something ancient cracked open. The arrogance of the old, the prejudice of the powerful. The lies told for centuries on the bridge. Ethan placed a hand on her shoulder, his voice a whisper. You just rewrote history. She turned to him, her eyes glowing softly. No, she said. We just reminded it what life truly means. Down on the Varithian capital, the Emperor himself watched from his throne. His guards knelt beside him, awaiting his order to attack. But he said nothing. Instead, his trembling hand reached toward the hologram, his voice breaking. My daughter. For the first time in his reign, tears touched his eyes. Hours later, the human and Varithian fleets began to withdraw. No battle, no bloodshed, just silence, heavy, sacred silence. The kind that comes after revelation. Months passed. The Odyssey became a symbol of peace, its crew honored across both worlds. Elion grew quickly, walking before his first year, speaking before his second. Every time he laughed, lights flickered. Every time he touched something broken, it healed. When Elira took him to the royal garden of Seraphis Prime for the first time, the same nobles who once mocked her now bowed as she passed. Is it true? One whispered, he carries both stars. Elira smiled gently. No, she said, he is the stars. Ethan stood beside her, his arm around her shoulders, watching their son chase the floating petals that glowed in the wind. They sent you to me as a joke, he murmured. But I think the universe was laughing for a different reason. Elira smiled softly. Maybe fate has its own humor. And as their son's laughter echoed through the shining halls of the Empire, both humans and Varithians looked up to the heavens. To the day they realized that unity was not born from treaties or empires, but from a single act of love that defied everything the stars thought they knew. The Barren princess had become a mother. The human soldier had become a legend, and together, they gave birth to something greater than both worlds combined. The child who would one day teach the galaxy to stop fearing what it could not understand and start cherishing what it could become.